Hello, everybody. I'd like to begin by saying that the purpose of these best practices are not only for people who do management of change for a regulation such as ISO or OSHA PSM, but also people who choose to do change management as part of a best practice for handling change within their company. I'll start off with a brief cartoon from our friend Dilbert here. I'll give you a second to read it. So basically, it's a pretty common allusion to the old way of handling any type of change or new process was to throw people at it, where the new way is to develop those strategies that help it make sense to people so that they buy in and embrace that change. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Key MOC goals and challenges that we seem to run into quite a bit, or I've run into quite a bit over the last 10 or 12 years doing this. First of all, people want to be able to manage change in a simple and repeatable way. Once you identify the way that works best for you, you want to make sure you continue to use that methodology and that it's easy for your employees to understand. You want to be able to identify and mitigate the risks associated with the changes. Anytime you change your processes, those are new for people to learn, and you want to make sure that you limit the downside and get as much of the benefit out of it as you can. Some of the key challenges that people run into, a big one would be matching the amount of work you do on a change to the complexity of that change. That could include what type of evaluation do you do? Is it an involved one or a simple one? How many approvers do you require and of what type? And even what type of pre-startup safety review or quality check do you need to do before that change is put into place? MOC closure can be a big challenge. How many MOCs do you have that are running, but they're not closed? So this can clutter up your system by having a lot of MOCs that are just waiting for documents to be updated, procedures to be updated, and really you just need to get that work done to prepare yourself for the next change in that area or on that product. And temporary changes can be a big challenge as well. Generally, people try to do mostly permanent changes, but from time to time you might have to do a temporary change because of a raw material change or the need to do maintenance on a piece of equipment. You want to make sure that you have a defined date to revisit that temporary change, that you do come back and revisit it on that date, and you properly evaluate it to decide whether it needs to be removed, extended, or aborted completely and replaced with something else. I'll get into more of that more later. Now, the benefits of management of change, some of them do reflect on the challenges I just mentioned. Obviously, being able to manage change effectively across your organization. And being able to do that efficiently is a big challenge. There's a lot of companies who manage change really well, but what they've done over time is accomplish that effectiveness by throwing people at it or by having a very labor-intensive process. So once you have that effectiveness, it's good to get efficiency as well along with that. Ensure that all changes are properly reviewed, approved, and communicated. And I'll get through those items as I walk through the stages in a standard MOC best practices workflow. Reducing the costs associated with managing change by doing it correctly the first time and not having to rework or retry changes later on. If you do a proper risk assessment and mitigation, then you can determine what the best method is upfront on how to do this. You may have to amend that change later on, but certainly put your best foot forward and not just take a stab the first time and have it be a moving target. And of course, being able to ensure that the data and the knowledge that you collect isn't lost and you can share it, whether reactively or proactively. And that's typically by using an electronic system, but certainly if you did have a paper system, you can have organized filing and forms to benefit you in the knowledge sharing as well. Now, sorry this screen might be a little bit small, but I wanted it to match the next slide. So I just want to walk quickly through the basic stages in our standard MOC workflow, just to indicate that each of them has its own purpose. So some people may look at 8 stages before I get into them and say that seems involved, that sounds like a lot. But if you look at the first one being initiation, that's where you get your ideas from. So without an idea, you don't have a change. Pre-approval, as I'll talk about in a minute, if you have the belief that everyone should be able to initiate a change within your company because you want to take the value from all the knowledge that all the people possess, then you do need a pre-approval step to make sure that a formal evaluation or risk mitigation, the third step, is required. You don't want to get into a long evaluation checklist and not having pre-approved it. Maybe it's some crazy idea that somebody put in. The fourth step is formal approval, and that's more of a business step. Certainly any CEO or manager would agree that you don't want anything, any resources spent or people's time used without getting the proper approvals. Implementation, that's the building of the change or the writing of the procedure or the design of the new product, whatever you're doing in this change. The PSSR, or pre-startup safety review, or if you're making widgets, more of a quality assurance step. That's fairly obvious. You want to make sure that whatever change you've built has been done correctly according to the plan, and that you're ready to start that up. Startup, pretty self-explanatory. You need to put that change into use. And closure is where you make sure that all the loose ends are tied up and you're ready to move on to the other changes that you have to do. So I'll get into each of these steps in more detail, and you can certainly vary the content of those steps, as I mentioned earlier. Vary the amount of work you do to the complexity of the change, but leaving out any one of these steps, even on a simple change, can run into problems.